The South Star Wall at Donner Summit near Lake Tahoe, California, is a world-class cliff where the evolution of hard climbing in America is written on the crag like hieroglyphics. I visited the area back in 2010 to film Lonnie Kalk on the classic Scott Fry route, steep climb named Desire. And I was amazed at the beauty of the rock and the density of the climbs. Which is why when JP Melville, a fellow photog and a badass climber in his own right, reached out and said he had some killer footage that he shot of his buddy Jonathan sending Taste the Bronco, a burly 513 plus link up using only natural protection, and asked if I'd be interested in collaborating on a video, I was stoked, and I immediately began diving into the history of the area to see what I could dig up. According to this 1990 issue of Climbing magazine, things really got started at the Star Walls in 1985 when Japanese climber Hidetaka Suzuki established the Star Wall crack, a horrendously thin 513 crack which he led on gear. The following year, he also established Puma 513B, a nightmarish corner and roof with tough protection placements that was immortalized in this classic blue water rope sad. Just imagine how badass leading 513 trad was back in the mid-80s. Eventually though, the lycra-fueled sport climbing revolution that started in France took hold in America and at Donner Summit, and most of the original routes were retro-bolted, sometimes with and sometimes without the first ascensionist's permission. Nowadays, every line at the crag can be climbed by weaving a line through a patchwork of big bolts and permadraws. However, that certainly doesn't stop anyone from choosing to skip the fixed hardware and go big on trad-protected sends of these difficult sport climbs. In fact, in a feat that was made famous in Volume 6 of Eric Perlman's mega classic video series Masters of Stone, that's exactly what Belgian climber Nico Favres did back in 2006 when he claimed the first ground-up all-gear ascent of Father's Day, 514A, creating one of the hardest trad climbs in the world in the process. This was a huge send for the time and earned Nico an honorable mention in Climbing Magazine's Golden Piton Awards. Since then, only a handful of climbers have repeated the climb in a similar fashion. Now, in 2020, the fire of trad climbing at the Star Walls has been stoked again by Jonathan Guy, who recently did the first known all-gear ascent of Taste the Bronco.
You like the climbing out here in Tahoe?
I love it. I've spent a disproportionate number of my weekends out here, and now with COVID, I'm out here full time. Almost every day, I've woken up and been after coffee, I've been like, man, I am so freaking fortunate to be out here.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel guilty finding such big silver linings in this time, but this has been a really special chapter for me. This area, Donner Summit's where I've spent a lot of time climbing and had a lot of my kind of breakthroughs, a lot of the seasons where I felt like I really improved as a climber and got on things that challenged me and intimidated me. Climbing the bolted lines on gear, primarily I think for me it's a way to keep challenging myself on routes that I've done. There are routes here that I've been able to do on bolts, and I still enjoy the climbing, and I feel like there's still opportunities there for me to do something that's really difficult for me, and climbing them on gear is a way to do that. It also gives me a chance to get kind of head game practice. It lets me get comfortable doing really hard moves on gear, and then hopefully I can take those skills and transfer them to other places where maybe I haven't rehearsed a climb repeatedly because it's not bolted, or I have to on-site or something like that. Yeah, so I'm out here at Star Wall working on a route. It's a kind of a link up actually. It starts up a route called Taste the Pain and then goes into the finish of another route called Bronco. Bronco was put up by Hidetaka Suzuki in 1988. Originally established all in gear, and since then it's been retro bolted and is equipped with fixed draws. And Taste the Pain, the bottom half, is also fully bolted and equipped with fixed draws. And so I've done the route on bolts, and I think it also protects with gear. So I'm now trying to do this link up on gear, and it's called Taste the Bronco.
So Taste the Bronco is a link up of a Hidetaka Suzuki route from the mid-80s and a Don Welsh route from the early 90s. I couldn't get a hold of Hidetaka. Last I saw, he had moved to Hawaii and took up kiteboarding. But I was able to catch up with Don via Skype, and he provided some interesting context to his route and the era of its creation. My first question, though, was what he remembered about Hidetaka.
Suzuki just I don't know. He didn't get a lot of press. Nobody got a lot of press. There wasn't like Instagram and all that stuff back then. You know, I mean, he was ahead of his time as far as crag climbing goes. I mean, you can look at his roots in Josh and the Valley and places like that. I mean, all you have to do is go try one of those things. You realize how good he was at, you know, squeezing his fingers into little holes. Oh yeah, I mean, he just did not eat. I mean, he was like cigarettes and coffee, you know, and if he red pointed something hard that he had been working on, he would like treat himself and go out and have sushi or something. But I mean, the guy, he would eat nothing, like some raisins or something at the crag. He was a rail for sure. But everyone was back, and everyone thought that was the key to climbing hard, was to just like starve yourself back then. If you look at all the old sport climbers, you know, from like Dale Goddard or Christian Griffith, or, you know, when the grades were starting to come around, nutrition wasn't the high on the scale, you know. Everyone was like, no, you can't eat, you can't drink, you know. It's just like cigarettes and coffee, and that's it, you know, which is dumb because, you know, it's just injury. I mean, look at my fingers, they're just ruined.
Well, let me see those again.
See, my right hand's all, and it's just from, you know, joint crack climbing and just climbing in general. It's like, this is what everyone has to look forward to in the future.
Don sent me a copy of his original topos for Taste the Pain, and it really put into perspective how much work went into establishing a route like that back then.
I was listening to a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers back then. That's where the name comes from. I don't know, once you dig into a route, it's just like you just want to do it. It actually took me quite a while because it's actually quite bouldery. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's not an endurance route like I'm mostly good at. But Taste the Pain is kind of, you know, it's 30 feet of pretty intense bouldering, and then the top's not so bad. And it's like two parallel cracks, so you end up, I ended up doing it like crack climbing. You know, it's all about like thumbs down here and putting your feet in the wall just right. So it's sort of like a flaring crack, you know, even though it's a sport climb. Although Jonathan has now done it without. I'd love to see his gear. I wonder what he put in on the lower stuff.
And so I've done the route on bolts, and I think it also protects with gear. So I'm now trying to do this link up on gear, and it's called Taste the Bronco, 13 plus. It starts up on Taste the Pain. There's a few easy moves at the bottom. You get to a jug, place some gear from there, and then it kicks off with an undercling and a long reach to a jug. From that jug, I can place two more pieces that are not the best, but I place two pieces there. And then climb a series of moves that are both face climbing and crack climbing, where kind of my left side is climbing face holds and my right side is jamming. I mean, I get into a decent but somewhat tenuous stance from which I place two small pieces, a number 5 Black Diamond Stopper and a 0.1 Black Diamond Z4. Place both of those and then launch into the first crux sequence, which is a long reach to a dish. And then I bring my feet up and make a pretty desperate move to a hand jam. I can make the move statically, but it's often done dynamically, and that's part of where the name of the route comes from, Taste the Pain. So I sink this hand jam, and from there I place two really good pieces, which I desperately need because I get only a really quick shake there, and then it launches into the second crux sequence, which is, for me, I Gaston, and then I match, and then I sink a couple finger locks with my left hand before I load up and make a really big move to the next horizontal rail. So I essentially dyno off of a finger lock, and usually both feet cut and I can just barely hold the swing. From there I swing my feet back on, match. I put a heel hook up above my head and make a really long, somewhat desperate lock off to an undercling flake. And then once I stand up into that flake, that spells the end of the crux, and I can get some gear in there. From there, I make a few somewhat thuggy moves, but on good holds, to eventually gain a knee jam, no hands rest. Place some gear there, shake out for as long as I feel like I need to, get my heart rate down, and then I launch into Bronco, and this is where the route kind of diverges. Taste the Pain would continue straight up into easy terrain, and instead I'm going to veer out right and capture some of the pumpiest climbing on this other route called Bronco. It's an amazing undercling rail that shoots across this roof, and it traverses right for a couple body lengths. And it would be extremely difficult because the wall on which you're pasting your feet is significantly overhung. But there's this perfect laser cut foot rail that goes all the way across. And so you make these series of undercling moves, boom, 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 traversing this rail. And at the end of the rail is a jug, and off that jug you make a huge move to another jug, match that, and then you pull onto the head wall. And the head wall's almost dead vertical. It has decent holds, but it's fairly technical climbing. I place only one piece on the head wall. Below me is nothing but air, and so I feel pretty comfortable there. But make a series of somewhat sequential moves up the head wall, and eventually make this really tenuous back step, the very last move to stand up tall and sink a finger lock from which I can clip the chains. Total shenanigans, like it's the most contrived thing I can think of in climbing. I really like climbing here, and I love these routes, and so sometimes even after I've sent one of these sport climbs, red pointed a project, like I'm still kind of excited to keep climbing it, and this is a way to like up the difficulty and give me something to work on that lets me continue to enjoy the same route, but also add this kind of heady technical aspect to it, because some of the routes protect fairly well and some of them have some pretty spicy sections. These climbs, I think it's very appropriate that they're bolted. I think these climbs would get done very rarely if they weren't bolted. But I've really enjoyed the process of climbing them on bolts and then continuing to work on them with gear.
Congrats, Jonathan. Great climbing. And thanks to Don Welsh for taking the time to run down memory lane with us. And huge thanks to JP Melville, who shot all this amazing climbing footage. Be sure to give him a follow on Instagram for more awesome content. Lastly, if anyone else out there wants to do a similar collaboration, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks for watching, and hit me with that subscribe if you enjoyed the video.